Afternoon, everyone. I'm Chris Clem, and welcome all to the February 6th meeting of the Unified Planning Work Program Committee. We'll start with the notice of non-discrimination. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process, regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. Accessibility statement. Whoops, just lost my screen. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1, Level AA Standards, and Revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, or if you have any technical difficulties, please contact Lauren McGee, MPO staff at lmagee@ctps.org or 857-702-3706 or via the chat box. Guidelines. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. After roll call, board members may mute and unmute themselves. Always remain muted unless actively speaking. To participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function. Find this by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with a raise hand button at the bottom, or the reactions button in the toolbar. The chair will then call on participants. If you're on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. Okay, and with that, I think we will call the roll. And I believe that is my job. This is my first time chairing, so please bear with me through any hiccups. So I will start. I am Chris Clem, representing MassDOT. Up next, I believe we have the City of Newton.
Yes, good afternoon. David Kozis, representing Mayor Fuller in the City of Newton.
Good afternoon, David. Up next, we have the Intercore Committee, City of Somerville.
Good afternoon. Tom Bent, City of Somerville, representing Mayor Katiana Ballantyne.
Good afternoon, Tom. Up next is the Metro West Regional Collaborative, Framingham.
Dennis Giambetti, representing Metro West, and Mayor Charles Ziski.
Hello, Dennis. Up next is MAPC. Do we have anyone from MAPC?
Just looking at the list, Chris, I do not see MAPC representation. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Moving on to the MBTA Advisory Board.
Hi, Hannah Swolakowski, MBTA Advisory Board. I'm also joined by Isabella from the Advisory Board as well.
Great. Hi, Hannah. Hi, Isabella. Up next is the Regional Transportation Advisory Council.
Ziggins from the Advisory Council.
Hi, Len.
Hi.
Up next, I believe, is the Three Rivers Interlocal Council.
Hi, Tom O'Rourke from the town of Norwood, representing the Turk subregion.
Great. Hello, Tom. Next is the City of Boston. Do we have anyone from the City of Boston with us?
So far, I'm also not seeing the City of Boston represented.
Okay, thanks, Dave. And last but not least, we have the Town of Wrentham. Anyone from the Town of Wrentham with us?
Yeah, but just going back, Chris, Jen is just joining. So
Great. Hello, Jen. We're just doing the roll call. Are you here to represent the City of Boston?
I am, yes, sorry. I clicked the wrong Zoom link.
Excellent, and no worries. So that is the roll. Up next, public comments. Do we have any members of the public that would like to provide public comment to the group today? I'll take that as a no, not seeing any raised hands. Moving on to our first action item. Is this one handled by Olivia?
I think this is you.
Okay, sorry about that. So these materials were distributed to folks prior to the meeting. The first action item is approval of the meeting minutes from June 13th, 2024. Before we take, or should we take anyone have any comments or questions on the meetings before we move for approval? Seeing no raised hands, I'll ask for a motion and a second to approve the minutes from June 13th.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes, June 13th.
Motion by Tom. Do we have a second?
David Kosis, second.
Second by David. Thank you. Do we need to do the roll call again, or is it all in favor? Any against?
Yeah, I'm
Roll
happy to
call
do the
again.
roll call if you prefer, but you're also welcome to do it.
I'm happy to defer the roll call to you, Lauren. Thanks for volunteering.
Sounds good. Chris Clem,
Chris Clem, MassDOT, yes.
David Kosis,
David Kosis, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Benton, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Hannah Switlakowski,
Abstain.
Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
let's see, Tom O'Rourke,
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Jen Rowe.
Jen Rowe abstained.
Okay, and that motion passes.
Great. Thank you for the help, Lauren. Moving on to our second action item today, that is the approval of the August 8th, 2024 meeting minutes. Before I ask for a motion in a second, does anyone have any comments or questions on the minutes? Seeing no hands, Lauren, would you mind, no, wait, seeing no hands, can I get a motion in a second to approve the minutes?
I'll make a
Jen
motion
Rowe.
to approve. Oh, sorry, Jen. I can yield. I'll make a motion to approve August 8th minutes.
All right, motion made by Tom,
Happy to second that.
seconded by Jen. Lauren, would you mind reading the roll?
Of course. Chris Clem,
Chris Clem, MassDOT, yes.
David Kosis,
David Kosis, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Benton, yes.
Yes. You want the chair set up? Yes.
seems like MIPC has joined us.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm here.
No worries. Thank you, Julia. Sorry, Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Julia Wallers,
Julia Wallers, yes.
Hannah Switlakowski,
Abstain.
Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Tom O'Rourke,
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
and Jen Rowe.
Jen Rowe, yes.
And that passes.
Great. Thank you, Lauren. Moving on to our third and final meeting minutes action item. This would be the minutes for the November 7th, 2024 meeting. Before moving for a motion, does anyone have any comments or questions on the minutes? Seeing no raised hands, can I get a motion and a second to approve the meeting minutes from November 7th?
The motion to approve the minutes from November 7th.
Okay. See two raised hands.
Tom Benton, I'll second that.
All right, sounds good. Lauren, would you mind reading the roll?
Of course. Chris Clem,
Chris Clem, MassDOT, yes.
David Kosis,
David Kosis, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Benton, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Julia Wallers,
Julia Wallers, yes.
Hannah Switlakowski,
Abstain.
Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Tom O'Rourke,
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
and Jen Rowe.
Jen Rowe, yes.
And that motion passes, Mr. Chair.
Excellent. Thanks, Lauren. Moving on to agenda item 6. This is an action item for the FFY 2025 UPWP Amendment 2, and I believe Olivia will handle this.
Yes, thank you. So I guess first I can just introduce myself really quickly. My name is Olivia Sakosha. I'm the new UPWP program manager for the MPO. I started in January, so I've had a great start so far. I'm really excited to work with this committee closely over the next several months as we develop the next cycle of UPWP. So it's nice to meet you all. And I can jump into the talking about Amendment 2 now. So Lauren, if we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the Amendment 2 covers 8 discretionary grants that will be added to the FFY 2025 UPWP in Appendix A. This first one is funded through a prioritization process pilot program, or P4 grant. It was awarded to the Boston Region MPO for $1,488,000. And this will enable the Boston Region MPO to review and improve its process for assessing projects to include in the TIP and the LRTP. So it will allow the MPO to engage stakeholders and members of the public in developing updates to the project evaluation criteria, project scoring, and decision making. And if we go to the next slide, please. The second grant is a congestion relief grant, which was awarded to MassDOT, MAPC, and the City of Boston for $21.6 million. And this is for the Link Up project, which will improve the region's shuttle networks and the Blue Bike system as well. So shuttles through this grant will be implemented in the Seaport, Charlestown, and Alston Brighton neighborhoods. And the Blue Bike system will see new bikes, including e-bikes, and stations across the system will be also upgraded to electrified stations through this grant. Julia, I see a hand raised.
Yeah, just the amount of the award there isn't correct as listed. Right, it says 12 million, but it was 21.
Sorry about that. Thank you for catching that.
I think that's the amount, because part is sort of split between MAPC for Blue Bikes and Boston for the shuttles. And also we've sort of had that paused for now, but we're still hopeful. Sorry,
thank you for bringing that to my attention. I can also update the memo to reflect the correct information as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I can email you the detail.
Thank you. Okay. So if we can move to the next slide, please, Lauren. Thank you. These next 3 are Safe Streets for All grants. The first one here I have here is awarded to the City of Quincy for $126,400 to conduct demonstration activities through the city's Transportation Safety Action Plan. And the second SS4A grant was awarded to the City of Watertown for $806,192 for the city to develop a Safe Streets campaign, which will include an educational campaign. The city will conduct a speed limit study and implement traffic calming demonstration activities near a school for individuals that are blind or visually impaired. And last on this slide, we have an SS4A grant for the town of Needham for $320,000 to redesign Great Plain Ave. And as part of this, the street will have improved pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, and the number of car travel lanes will be reduced from 2 in each direction to 1. And if we could go to the next slide, please. The last 3 grants here are all Reconnecting Communities pilot program grants. So the first being awarded to the City of Boston for $2 million to redesign Mattapan Square, which will reconnect kind of 2 separate sides of the neighborhood and improve multimodal connection in the center of the neighborhood as well. The second one listed here is the Walking to Wonderland project, which was is for the city of Revere, and they were awarded $400,000 to conduct a study to implement several multi-use shared paths, which will provide greater connectivity to the new Wonderland commuter rail station. And lastly here, the MBTA was also awarded an RCP grant for $2 million to bring the JFK UMass station into a state of good repair. And this grant will also improve its accessibility, enhance its environmental resiliency. So those are the 8 grants. If we could go to the next slide, please. I'd like to open it up for any other comments or questions. And after, I believe I will ask for an endorsement of the amendment. However, there will be an edit to the amount for that, the congestion relief grant. So I'm actually not quite sure how to go about that.
Thanks, Olivia, for the presentation, and thanks for Julia for acknowledging that mistake we had made prior to the meeting. We will work with MAPC to make sure that that amount is corrected accurately to the award amount. Yeah, so kind of jumping right off Olivia, thumbs up. Thanks, Julia. What Olivia just said, that was certainly a lot of grants, a lot of great awards and activities to take place in the Boston region in coordination with a lot of its partner agencies and communities. So for moving for a vote, do we have any comments or questions on those awards? Seeing none, can I get a motion and a second to move forward with Amendment 2? I think release it for 21-day public comment. Is that correct? Jen Rowe.
Yes, I would like to move to vote to endorse, release this for public comment with the kind of amendments described earlier to the one grant.
Before going to Len, Dave, do you have anything to add?
Sorry to jump the line here, and to clarify Chris's original question, this motion we're seeking is to endorse within the committee this motion, as it is not federally required to release.
Got it. Thank you for that clarification, Dave, and apology for the confusion. I'll go right back to Jen. Are you comfortable making a motion to endorse?
Yes, I will make a motion to endorse the amendment.
Okay. And moving on to Len.
I will second that motion. Thank you.
All right. Motion has been made and seconded. Lauren, would you mind calling the roll?
Of course. Chris Clem.
Chris Clem, Mascot, yes.
David Kosis.
David Kozis, yes.
Tom Bent.
Tom Bent, yes.
Dennis Giambetti.
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Julia Wallers.
Julia Wallers, yes.
Hannah Switlikowski.
Hannah Switlikowski, yes.
Len Diggins.
Diggins, yes.
Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
And Jen Rowe.
Jen Rowe, yes.
And that motion carries.
Excellent. Thank you all. And thank you, Lauren, again. Len, your hand is still up. Just want to confirm you don't have another question.
I don't. I'm sorry. I just put it
Okay.
down. Sorry about that.
No worries. Didn't want to miss you.
I appreciate that. Derek never would have done that, so you're winning already.
Appreciate that note.
Thanks for the shout out.
Moving on to agenda item 7, the FFY 2026 UPWP cycle. Tegan Tech will handle this.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here today to help set the stage for the kickoff of this next federal fiscal year UPWP cycle. So if we can go to the next slide. And then the next slide. So what I'm going to do just in my remarks today is just highlight for this committee some of the ways in which we expect this upcoming cycle to be the same and some ways in which we expect it to be a bit different as compared to prior years. So next slide. So it's the same. I may be stating the obvious, but at the broadest sense, the UPWP is still our federally required document that outlines all of the transportation planning and activities for metropolitan areas. So we are required to produce this UPWP, and we will continue to follow the requirements that are embedded within what we should be producing through a UPWP. But just to kind of remind us where we're at and what this document is for just a moment, another way of thinking about it is that it's really the annual work plan for our agency, and it defines how we use those transportation dollars that are available to us, as well as to MAPC in this document's case. And that primary source of funding that we're talking about in the UPWP is the planning, the PL, and 5303 formula federal funding. But the UPWP does also include a variety of other funding sources, such as through other agency work that we do, or the federal discretionary grants, some of which we've been talking about today. So it's really comprehensive of the different funding sources. And one thing I'd like to note about this year, and this is not that dissimilar from many other years in the past, where we're seeing only a modest increase in the formula fund availability, only about 1%. So we're really looking at enhancing our work within our existing resources as part of this UPWP. Next bullet on here, the expected timing for the delivery of the document is also similar to prior years. Like last year, we have the goal of endorsing the federal fiscal year 2026 UPWP by the end of June, but we'll talk a bit more about the schedule in upcoming slides. And then finally, the overall goal of our engagement is largely similar, which is to really broadly reach out to MPO members and members of the public, and to solicit your input alongside of staff input into what type of work you value through the MPO. So in that sense, things will largely be the same, but there's a number of nuances. So let's move on to a few things that I'd like to highlight as being different. If we can go to the next slide. So of course, we're thrilled to have our new UPWP program manager, Olivia Sakosha, introduce herself again today, and we're very happy to have her on board. She's getting up to speed very quickly, but the need to recruit a new program manager for the UPWP did put us in the position where our timeline is a bit more aggressive than we would like it to be in typical years. So as an example, last year, the survey to gather input into the UPWP had already been posted and was closed by February 1st, and we still have to take that step. So as I mentioned, our target for endorsement is still the end of June, but we'll have to update you as we move along our timeline, which Olivia will talk a little bit more about in a second. And I also just kind of want to ask you all to bear with us with the expedited process this year. And we're always very welcoming of any input, suggestions you have for improving the process. And they may be items that we have to take into account for a more typical timeline next year, but please keep them coming so that we can continue to consider that input that you have. Next, in terms of the narrative of the document, I'm working more closely directly with staff to update the overarching narrative that carries through the document. We want to make it really cohesive and also sort of in alignment with how we're doing our work planning now, which has shifted a bit. And in doing that, we could also identify other ways we'd like to improve the document. We may not get to all of those this year, but we can hold some of them for consideration in following years. And then lastly, on this slide, a very important way in which we're continuing to shift how we carry out this UPWP cycle is how we want to kind of expand how we engage with you all as the UPWP committee and kind of expand your attention on the content, the entirety of the content of the document in a way that is very intentional and a little different than how we have done this in the past. So traditionally, the way we've engaged this committee is to spend a really significant amount of time on the selection of the discrete studies, the budget for which has been about a few $100,000 over the last few years, whereas the entire body of work represented in the UPWP just for MPO staff is about $6.5 million. So that's a gap if we're not really engaging you in sort of the entirety of the work in the UPWP. But I do want to acknowledge that even though they're a small portion of our work plan, discrete studies are really exciting and a really exciting place to provide input. And we want to continue to engage you in the selection of them. We know they kind of offer an opportunity for us to explore ideas that don't really fit in with our ongoing initiatives or that do but require extra resources. And so we can kind of call that out in a very intentional way with the discrete study process. They do go through a different type of review process than other ongoing work where we develop distinct scopes of work that gets input from the board, and then we get that approved by the board. And then there's an expectation that we present the results of that work to the board. So we know that they generate a lot of interest in that sense, and also because they tend to have very distinct deliverables like reports or story maps or guidebooks that are of interest to not just this committee, but stakeholders of the region as a whole. So we're going to welcome continued input into that process. We'll ask for ideas, both broad to inform all of our work and very specific in terms of what could be discrete studies. We'll assess all of those ideas in the context of our ongoing work. And we'll share the entirety of the input, and then we with staff will work to distill out a subset or a distinct list of those discrete studies that we can then come to you all for feedback. Now, what we've been talking about this year is not necessarily going through the same sort of kind of like energy intensive ranking process with those studies. I think it'll be more valuable for us to sort of bring that subset of really, we think, feasible, important ideas in the context of the other work that we're going through, and ask you to really just talk about and provide your input into those studies so that we can develop a final list. And then at the same time, we want to talk with you all about our work as a whole, and also work with you all to bring more of the value and what you value from the discrete studies to the conversations about our ongoing initiatives. So we'll want to talk with you more about what those initiatives look like, share some of that narrative about what those initiatives are as early as possible in the process for your additional kind of conversation and feedback. And I also want to recognize that some of these ongoing initiatives we're already developing priorities for in a way that will result in the kinds of things that you find exciting about the discrete studies, like distinct deliverables. So for example, the priority of the bicycle and pedestrian program, as we've been talking about it so far, is anticipated to be beginning to work on what will eventually be a regional bicycle and pedestrian plan, with a focus this coming year on needs and gaps in the region that can have very distinct deliverables associated with them. Similarly, with the freight program, we're talking about prioritizing updating the freight action plan. So we'd like to discuss these kinds of things with you as well as we're evolving those priorities for the coming federal fiscal year. So with that, I can pause there. I can answer any questions you have now, but I also would love to segue when you're ready to Olivia, who will talk a little bit more about what that kind of engagement will look like through the month-by-month kind of scheduling process. So with that, Chris, I can pause, see if there are any questions, and we can move on if either way.
Thanks, Tegan. Yeah, that was a really helpful overview, especially for myself being really new here. Does anyone have any questions before we move forward? Yeah, Len, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Are we going to talk about the way that we select the studies? Because you just mentioned that instead of scoring, we're going to have any conversations about the prospective studies. Is that something that Olivia is going to talk about? Because if so, I can just wait before making my comment to see what she has to say.
I don't think that's part of, Olivia, your planned talking points for today. And maybe I can say a little bit, but Dave and Olivia, you can kind of step in and correct me if I'm wrong. We will still look at the different ideas and look at them as we have in the past in terms of their alignment with the long range plan goal areas, and think through how those then sort of would rank from our perspective as staff. But what we may not do this year is go through that survey process where we asked everyone to individually rank and therefore come up with that kind of score of the different projects through the ranking process. I think that it might be more valuable for us, instead of going through that kind of overly quantitative process, to really like talk about in more sort of content oriented way, sort of what might make more sense for these studies to focus on and what aligns best with the goals of the MPO and the work that's feasible in the upcoming federal fiscal year. Dave and Olivia, do you want to add to that at all?
Chris, can I be recognized?
Go ahead. Oh yeah, of course. Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you. Yeah, just completely echoing what Tegan said. Perfect alignment with that. I think, Len, in kind of the spirit of your question as well, in terms of idea intake and discussion. So on the intake side, we will share through Qualtrics for a initial idea input that will be extended to the public, as well as the board and the committee as a subset of that. And then, as Tegan said, we'll hold a UPWP committee meeting to look at that shorter list of feasible study ideas and discuss and have you weigh in as to what you believe the regional impact would be or what your preferences are. And we'll take those notes as we develop the final scenario.
Well, I mean, certainly if you call it over quantitative approach, that's inherently bad. I don't know if I would consider the scoring overly quantitative. I do like seeing how other members of the committee and other members, period, feel about how they score things, because it gives me a good sense of their priorities. And my concern about simply doing it in a meeting is that you have people that talk a lot, like me, and people who don't talk as much, and I'd like to, I just really want to provide like some kind of neutral way to get their input. And so if we're not going to do the scoring, then maybe we ask people if they want, to provide me some kind of written input, so that we really get to hear from people who maybe don't engage in this kind of dialogue, either personality wise or because of time constraints. Because the other issue too with a meeting, is that there's only so much time. And believe it or not, I don't say all that I want to say in a lot of meetings, because it's like we're running out of time, and I want to give other people time to talk. And I'll just note this, since I see Derek here. Derek would always give me a lot of time to talk. So that's it. Thank you.
Just respond, Chris. Thanks, Len, for that. I definitely agree that we can't only rely on folks' verbal responses and reactions to these ideas. And I should always watch my words, and especially with you. When I refer to the quantitative nature of it, when I think of quantitative, when we do our TIP project scoring and when we do our long range planning scoring, the scoring is really based on data and like data that we're bringing to bear to assess a number of the different categories. And what I feel the way we've done the ranking, it's still quite qualitative. It's not really based on data and specific things that we can measure. And so to me, that sort of puts a layer of quantitativeness on something that's really more qualitative in nature in terms of its description. And I think it's given the impression of something that's got more sort of authority in the numbers than it really does. And when it really comes down to it, we really want to like kind of have a sense of, yes, these align well with the goals and they're what's more realistic and the agency's resources that are available. And I think those are the things that fundamentally matter the most, along with that input to people as to what matters to them the most and what they think is most useful and valuable. So we still need to gather that input, not just from people who speak live in the meeting, but otherwise. And I think there are ways we can think about doing that without going through sort of a ranking exercise that might kind of oversell the ability to make decisions based on quantitative information, because it's not based on real quantitative information necessarily. Does that make more sense? Did I say that better?
It makes more sense. It makes more sense to me. I guess what I really wanted to drive home about, what I liked about the scoring though, was it was often interesting to see how different groups scored differently. And I realize it's qualitative, but it was just really interesting. Like things like the advisory council would score high, would not score high, for other groups, and that to me was just a really good insight into what other people valued, and so that's why I kind of like the scoring. And like I said, I understand, when you do scores, it makes it seem a little more scientific, for lack of a better word, than it is, but yeah, okay. So I'm just advocating for something that allows us to get those insights from other participants, in a way that really gives them time to themselves, and maybe even the groups that they represent, to do that. So I think if I talk more, I'll become less clear. But was that clear enough,
I hear you.
Megan?
Yeah, I definitely hear you that there's some
Okay.
way to assess priorities outside of these conversations.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for those comments, Len. Certainly make a lot of great points. David, you can go ahead.
Yeah, so the idea is that staff would still present, I guess, every idea that was generated through the public process to this committee, or just a subset of those ideas that were, I guess, viewed by staff as reasonable or, implementable or something. And I guess would it be that, as we're not going to be scoring anything, but how would it be done? Like, as each idea for a study's presented, would we just sort of vote yes, continue to consider it, or at that point, because there's so many that usually come in, right? Has to be a way to
Exactly.
just not keep on considering everything, right?
Yeah. The idea is that you should see And I'm going to let Dave talk about this more in a second, but the idea is that you should see and know what all the input is, but we want to help this committee by working to refine what is sort of feasible, reasonable, and in alignment with the goals without asking you to do that work sort of for us. So I think it's useful to see what people are saying and to read all that and to sort of know that. But for us to go through and try to assess that entire universe, it's usually a very large universe. It's not always, but it usually is. And so we think it's helpful to work with you all to do some of that vetting and to support this committee and having kind of meaningful conversations about the ideas in there that are the most aligned with what we already know to be the MPO's goals, but not to not share information with you, to still share that sort of entire bit of information. Dave, am I speaking accurately as to the plans for this process? We're still evolving. The plans for this process is another thing I should say. And so this inputs and the questions are helpful.
I have little to add, and that is accurate. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Tegan, and Dave Hong as well. And thank you for that question, David. Does anyone have any more questions or comments on this item? I'll take that. Oh, one more. Jen Rowe, go ahead.
Just wanted to throw one thing out there too, is that it kind of has some there. I've seen in other instances like some sort of Zoom Mentimeter, like, you know, polling type thing that could happen in the meetings and then perhaps is left open for a period of time afterwards. If people did, as Lynn was saying, want to like think through and process a bit. Just want to throw that as an option, because I do understand that sometimes you'll have like a survey and people are most likely to respond in the actual meeting as opposed to follow up afterwards. That's kind of the reality, but just in case there is, you know, someone who wants to do that work afterwards, it's a balance there.
Yeah, great comment. Thanks for that suggestion. Tegan, would you like to respond to Jen at all?
No, I think that's great. I think we need to explore not only how we engage this committee, like you said, but also, and with tools like that, but also there are ways that we can go through some broader seeking out of input in terms of what are the top priorities without going through like the full kind of like you must rank every single study on a list. And so we can still gather all this kind of input in a way that I think will still be meaningful. So Jen, I really appreciate your ideas. I know you've tried some or carried out some really great kind of exploratory things with some of the tools in the TIP committee as well. So I really appreciate your ideas.
Thanks, Tegan. David Kozis, go ahead.
Just one last question. So so staff would still be generating all kinds of ideas for studies from the general public, like in all the same ways that you always have, right? So no change there in terms of any like indication of feasibility or anything like at that point that someone might be suggesting an idea that might not even get presented, I guess, to this committee.
Yeah, I'm not sure I totally understood the part of your question, but I think Dave can at least talk about what the survey is going to look like. Dave, why don't you talk about that, and maybe you can clarify if we didn't answer your question. Maybe Dave understood it better.
Chris, if I may, with David, I'm just going to recap what I believe was your question. You know, I think that the spirit of the question, David, is the last two questions, whether as a committee you'd be able to see what is come in, and that's our approach will be yes. I think what's worth repeating from what Tegan has said is we're working within an extremely truncated timeline, and so what was normally sequenced and paused and to reflect on to then very carefully comb through those has been shrunk. However, even with that, I think we're going to have 3 input sources. So for the broader public, from the board and staff working with those inputs. And so all of those 3 will be captured in what I believe is going to be a spreadsheet, and that will be made available to you. As for the likely in a raw form, for you to see. The short list that is discussed and as feasible to carry out work will be the ones brought forth to you to discuss and weigh into. However, the full list will be made available, and we'll work to write down some of the rationale behind responses to those ideas. I want to stop there and see if that answers the letter and the spirit of David's question. Go back to Chris.
Thanks for that clarity, Dave. David, does that answer your question?
I think it's fine. It's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jen Rowe, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say that well, a lot of the conversation here is focused on the discrete studies. I do appreciate the thought going into providing more kind of intentional of a window into the rest of the work that staff does, because I know it's a lot, and it's really valuable and interesting. And so I think there might be, even with this approach, a little bit more of an ability to see where, an idea for that came in as a discrete study is actually something that is being worked on through an existing program or something like that. So I'm excited to kind of see where this goes.
Thanks for the comment, Jen, and totally echo that sentiment. First year in this committee supporting the development of the UPWP. So I think certainly some changes to how things have done in the past years, but a lot of exciting opportunities for the committee to engage and influence next year's program priorities as well. So thanks everyone for those comments. Thanks again, Tegan. I will give one more moment. Any last minute questions before we move on to the next agenda item? Seeing none. Up next, agenda item 8, FFY 2026 UPWP development timeline. Whenever you're ready, Olivia.
Thank you. Yeah, so if we could go to the next slide, actually, please. So I will present just an overview of the development timeline for this cycle of the UPWP. So if we could move on actually to the next slide again, thank you. So like Tegan mentioned, our target timeline is to endorse the document by the end of June. So currently now in February, we've begun developing the document internally with our staff. And we will also begin the solicitation process shortly for input for the MPO's upcoming work. And we will get this information from 3 different sources, one being, of course, the MPO members. So you all will be receiving a survey shortly asking for your input on the MPO's ongoing work and also ideas for discrete studies. This survey will also be, a similar survey will also be shared out to the public. And we will also be asking staff to internally have conversations with their teams to develop ideas for ongoing work and studies as well. So this will all be happening throughout the rest of February. And at the beginning of March, the surveys will close. And from there, staff will work to aggregate the inputs that we've received and work towards forming that list of feasible study ideas. Also in March, the preliminary program and study budgets will be announced, and staff will use that as well to continue developing the document and developing their work descriptions. In April, like we mentioned, staff will bring that list of feasible discrete study ideas to this committee, and we will have a discussion. I should clarify here too that the raw universe will also be available to you as well. And throughout the month, the document will be continued to be developed. In May, the list of discrete studies will be finalized, and staff will produce a draft UPWP, which will be presented to this committee and then to the MPO board to request that it be released for public comment. And that public comment period will take place at the beginning of June. And by the end of June, the MPO board will vote to endorse the final 2026 FFY 2026 document. So that's a high level overview of the timeline here, and I will throw it back to Chris to open it up for any comments.
Thanks, Olivia. Really helpful overview of the timeline here, and certainly a lot of opportunities for the committee to engage and discuss and seek updates on ongoing developments as we move forward towards UPWP development approval. Does anyone have any questions for Olivia or comments? Seeing none, thank you again, Olivia. We'll move on to agenda item 9, that is members' items. Reports and notices by MPO members, including regional concerns and local community issues. Does anyone have any member items for the committee? Seeing no hands, I'll just say thanks everyone for bearing with me before we move on to the next agenda item. Appreciate everyone's patience, and this is fun. Right. Agenda item 10, next meeting to be announced. I'm sure staff will keep us in the loop and engaged on when potential meeting dates will be considered. We'll probably have another email thread to the whole group here about some opportunities or dates that we're considering once we kind of move forward with the development and everything like that. Jen Rowe, go ahead.
Just wanted to say thank you, Chris and Olivia and MPO staff for getting this group back together, and yeah, excited to see this work move forward.
Thank you. Yeah, good group, and yeah, also very excited. Seeing no other hands, I believe I should ask for a motion and a second to adjourn. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Hannah.
Move that the UPW committee adjourn.
Motion made. Len?
Len seconds it.
Seconded. Do we need to roll call, or is this an aye type of thing?
Just a motion and a second is sufficient.
All right, motion made and seconded. Everyone agree? Please say aye, I think.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? All right, hearing no nays. Thank you all. Good to meet the whole group and looking forward to continuing to work with everyone in the coming months.
Thank